Hello ladies and gentlemen, Panzer here, and today I'm taking a look at Valiant Hearts. Now Valiant Hearts is a 2D puzzle platformer set in World War I France. Now this is developed and published by Ubisoft. And it's interesting because this is a setting that you don't often see in a lot of games nowadays. There's been a recent increase in the number of World War II shooters, and definitely with games like Wolfenstein popularizing the particular genre. You don't see a lot regarding World War I, and there's probably a number of reasons for all that. But this isn't a shooter, this is a puzzle platformer, and it's a story-driven puzzle platformer. Now I've covered a couple of story-driven games so far on this channel, namely Monochroma and Lifeless Planets. And both have done what they do in very different ways. Admittedly, Monochroma is probably closest to the way that Valiant Hearts plays, but they still do their own particular style of platforming and their own particular style of storytelling. Valiant Hearts makes use of its aesthetics. The art style itself is sort of cartoonish in a way, and very much reminiscent of certain types of graphic novels. Namely, one of the things that you might notice as well, a lot of the characters, especially human characters, do not have eyes. And this is one thing that you can tell is a deliberate design choice. The only character, of course, that has eyes is the dog character, which, of course, is the one you're supposed to empathize a lot with, and is very much a connection for the player to the actual driven plot. There's also a lot of use of music, and although this is not, strictly speaking, a rhythm game, the use of music in the game is quite strong across the board. In fact, a couple of the puzzles actually have music synchronized with them. In particular, one stage that I remember was a level where you are attempting to escape from German forces in a car, and the actual explosions and machine gun fire was actually synchronized with the music in the background. While it's not critical to the actual gameplay, it was definitely a very nice touch and very welcome touch, which added a lot to the atmosphere of the game. It certainly helped with the pacing, and aside from that, is very nice and speaks as well for the attention to detail that was going on in the game. Of course, there's a lot of detail in the settings and the backgrounds as well. Some of the backgrounds are completely non-interactive, yet there is a lot going on in them. Additionally, the game also does make use of insets, and when I say insets, I'm talking about in the style of a photograph inset. However, it is animated, and it does help to get through certain segments. For example, machine gun nest in the distance. It does show a close-up of the man manning the machine gun for the player to actually time their movements with. A lot of the game is actually based on stealth. You play the role of a soldier with the French army who actually gets captured. So in an attempt to evade recapture by German forces, you do actually have to avoid being seen. You can fight back, but attacking any of them head-on is near suicide, so your only option is to distract them and attack them from the back. Definitely not the most honorable of ways, but definitely helps with the whole stealth sequences. There's also very good puzzle variety that I found, actually, with in regards to not just stealth sequences, but there's also such things as simple platforming, pulley puzzles, bridge puzzles, throwing puzzles even, or even just fetch X item to operate Y item puzzles. These are all based quite well across the entire board, and something that I can see, it does help to engage the player all the time. There isn't any particular segment where nothing is really happening, save for the cinematic sequences. However, cutscenes themselves are few and far between, and they serve to only move a major part of the story along. The rest of it is told quite simply through the characters, who communicate in a sort of grunting kind of gimpy fashion. However, words you can pick out, particularly in French as well, are quite noticeable. But the actual words they say are of minor importance. The topic of the conversation usually comes up in pictures and speech bubbles, so quite well told through that. In fact, the story is simple enough to understand for the most part. Difficulty pacing as well is quite well done throughout the entire level. I think they have, as far as puzzles, the more complicated the puzzle gets, it's not something that you're thrown in the deep end of. It is quite well spaced out, and it's quite well paced as well. The game also has a remarkable educational value. Of course, given that this is set during World War I, there's a lot of history And even though the story is intended to be fictional, and of course, as they say, any resemblance to any characters or persons living or dead is purely coincidental, as normally they would say in stories that are meant to be true or fictional. In this case, they do mix in a lot of historically accurate information together with the story to help with the whole immersion factor. But additional to that, they have gone one step further and included snippets of information. In fact, factual snippets are included for each level, so if the player wishes, they can open up a diary. They can see photographs, and they can also see not just authentic photographs, but also paragraphs explaining particular aspects of the war, for example, civilian life or soldier life, whatever is relevant to the actual situation, which does add quite a significant amount of educational value for this sort of game, which not many people would expect immediately, but of course these are all completely optional. There's nothing that you need to do to unlock them other than just entering the level. But it's nice to see that these sort of things have been included. However, no game is perfect, and there's a lot of negative points that I would bring up. The main thing being, though, that given that this is a story-driven game, is that there is a significant lack of replayability. There's no such thing as New Game Plus or anything like that. As far as I can see, there's only two reasons you would want to replay the game. One being that you actually like the story enough to want to experience it one more time, or because there are collectibles on each level, and you want to simply 100% complete the game. You might replay the game in order to collect all of these hidden items that are scattered throughout the levels. And while there's nothing entirely wrong with that, I don't see that as being a strong enough reason for me, anyway, to replay the game. The controls themselves, while responsive, I would say are a little bit awkwardly placed, and would definitely seem more at home on a gamepad. While I'm not entirely certain whether these are rebindable in any way. After all, having only spent a couple of hours of the game, I found that the controls themselves are workable, but it's slightly awkward. If you do have a gamepad, of course, I think you would probably enjoy using that a little bit more. But there aren't that many controls to worry about, so you could get by just using the keyboard, and not have to worry too much about that at all. One last thing is the hint system. Now, of course, any game with puzzles, it would be nice to have a hint system. However, I do think such a thing should be completely optional. The problem with Valiant Hearts is that the hint system is time-based. There's no prerequisite for it to unlock a hint or to give you a hint. It is completely time-based. So as long as you enter a level that has a puzzle in it, the timer starts ticking down, and if you take X amount of minutes or seconds, it'll immediately give you the hint there. While it doesn't open up and tell you the answer straight away, it does buzz you, quite annoyingly, to go and check the hint section, because it seems that the game thinks you're taking far too long. Now, the hints themselves are comprehensive, and they definitely, well, as near as makes a difference, gives you the actual answer to most of the puzzles. I do feel such a thing should be mutable. Like, if I want to complete a puzzle by myself, I should be able to just switch off the hints completely. And furthermore, I think having it as a time-based option seems to suggest that the game wants a player to only spend a certain amount of time on a puzzle anyway, and just get on with the story. Something that I don't feel is entirely correct. Any game, however good the story, should always be balanced with decent gameplay. After all, we're not looking at an interactive movie, we are looking at a game. Therefore, gameplay and story should always be well balanced. It's the same story that if you compare graphics and gameplay, they should always strike a balance wherever possible. And while this definitely does have that balance pretty well done, the fact that the hint system is based on time seems to suggest that the developers would rather the player just focus on the story. Something that's quite worrying indeed. Ultimately, this is a very nice single-player experience. The story is well written, and while I haven't completed it yet, so I can't comment on the actual ending, whether that's any good or not, it does seem to have the makings of a pretty good story, and from other reviews I've seen, it seems to be quite the emotional one, so definitely not a light-hearted experience. However, given that you probably only have one playthrough out of this game, you probably wouldn't want to replay it. I'd say it is still worth at least that one playthrough. But how much will all this cost you? And ultimately, is it any good? I'd say for how much you're going to pay for it, it could well be justified. Otherwise, pick it up on sale. And that's all there is to it. Thank you very much for watching. This has been Panzer taking a look at Valiant Hearts The Great War, now available on Steam for $14.99 or your regional equivalent. Definitely worth that one playthrough at that price. And I'll see you next time.